So, Randy, I feel like at the end of every hockey season, our brains and our minds get so cluttered off of everything that's happening. We don't really have a clear view and perspective of like how the season went and where the team is at. Now that we're more than a month removed from the final Sharks game, how are you starting to really see things more clearly about this team?
Well, just to quickly recap the season, I mean, there was all the excitement of the beginning of the season, and in particular, Macklin Celebrini and Will Smith and what they would bring. And it was a palpable, tangible electricity in the arena in that home opening game, and people clustered around the glass during the warm-up in a way that I hadn't seen for a long, long time. And it reminded me of back in the day.
Mhm.
And that was a wonderful feeling because you sensed that it was an ignition of something special for however many games or years that would take. Then we immediately had the disappointment of Macklin Celebrini's injury. And I truly believe it's an injury that will have ended up costing him the Calder Trophy, because I think that had he been healthy and at the pace he produced, I think there would have been a momentum that would have been very difficult for either Lane Hutson, who I think will win the Calder Trophy, or anybody else, whether that's Dustin Wolf or Matvei Michkov, to overcome. However, be that as it may, that's what happened. And Macklin, when he came back, picked right back up where he left off. After that, it was a lot about him because he was so new to us, and Will Smith, not to diminish from him, and his slower start and his managing of minutes by the organization. And I think they did a tremendous job at that, of massaging his ice time until he adjusted to playing in the NHL and eventually as a winger rather than as a center. I think the disappointment of the season for me was seeing guys leave who we didn't think were going to leave. Maybe like a Jake Wallman in particular, like a Mackenzie Blackwood when those trades happened. But they all make sense now. It was just, these are good people you hate to see leave the organization. I think we felt Mikhail Granlund was someone who would leave. And that was just as disappointing because what a great guy he is as well. And then after that, the way the season ended with those final 11 losses, that was a downer way to end. But as I look back on the season, and I can't take credit for this, and you probably know this, but the fans don't, the best or the most fun last place team you'll ever see was credited to me because I said it, but it was actually our super producer extraordinaire, Sean Madison, who whispered it into my ear. And I just stole it, as we all do in this business. And I do want to give him credit, though, for coming up with that. It was a season that was fun, despite the fact that for the second straight year, the Sharks finished in 32nd place. And that's kind of a wrap on that, tie a bow on that. There were other bright spots. There were other downer spots. But as I have some reflection now, that's kind of how I look back on the season. A fun team, but a team that didn't make any progress in the standings.
I kid you not. I was at dinner last night out at a restaurant, and somebody asked how the Sharks are doing. I tried as best I could to explain it, and the person came back to me with, well, aren't they the most interesting, most fun last-place team you've ever seen?
Yeah.
I was like, well, yeah, that's what Randy said. So, look, there you go. It's obviously caught on. I know you get this too, right? When trying to explain where this team is at to maybe some people or fans who aren't watching every single move, you hope it's kind of like the Golden State Warriors right after Steph Curry debuted, but this is before Klay Thompson was around and Draymond Green were around and before the winning and championships came. But you could kind of start to see something. And I guess maybe that puts a lot of pressure on Macklin Celebrini and or Will Smith. But I think we are in the infancy, and I do think that someday you and I are going to look back and say, well, that 2024-25 season, let's call that officially the start of something. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But I do think this past season could have been the beginning of something.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Warrior parallel is valid up to a point.
Yeah.
And for the non-hockey hardcores, they have to understand that unlike the NBA, where if you have a superstar and maybe superstar B on your team,
You're good.
and and maybe somebody coming off the bench
Right.
like Steve Kerr in his heyday with the Bulls and Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen. You've got the core right there of a potential championship team. Well, in the NHL, that's not the case because you need a lot more. You need about 9 out there to make up your Stanley Cup core.
Right.
One of them better be your goalie. And the Sharks aren't at anywhere close to that yet, but I agree. The seeds have been planted. There's been some growth in players like William Eklund and others, and some other additions like Askarov in net and other players beyond that, where you've got a feeling that this is the start of something that could be special.
If I said, well, you've seen most of the Sharks head coaches, Randy, that's not true. I believe you've seen all the Sharks head coaches over the years. That understood, we've only seen one full season of Ryan Warsofsky behind the bench, NHL's youngest head coach. What are the early indications of how he handles this group, how he latched on with this group? Kind of a clean slate for everybody, but I'll say this, I don't think enough people were talking about him and setting a tone and turning the culture of this team this past year.
I agree. I think he did a nice job for his first year as an NHL head coach. Obviously, he has coaching experience, championship coaching experience prior to this. But I think as I reflect back on Ryan's first year, what impressed me most was his growth, his ability to adapt as a coach. And in particular, I think his demeanor behind the bench. I felt very early in the year where there was a lot of frustration, especially at the start when the Sharks couldn't win in October and they didn't have Celebrini. He was very demonstrative behind the bench toward the officials. And that tended to bleed onto the bench, even when Macklin came back. And Macklin started to adopt a bit of an aggressive banter behavior with the referees at 18 years of age. And we know how that plays in the NHL. It doesn't play very well. And I think to Ryan's credit, he realized that he had to change and he had to tone down maybe what worked for him in the past at his other levels and realize that that wasn't going to work for this team at this time or for him. And I asked him about it and I said, "You've calmed down." And he said, "I have." And he said, "First of all, I didn't want to give myself a heart attack before I'm 40 years of age." And fair enough for that. But I think that then bled into the team. I saw a different Macklin Celebrini, and I saw a different attitude on the bench. Not that you don't want your bench engaged and on top of every moment of every play. And you know, some banter with the officials is all part of what they do and what the game is. But I think that maybe the attitude they had toward officiating that hurt them in the first half of the season started to help them later on in the year. And it brought a calmness to the group. And I give Ryan a lot of credit for that, some self-realization, some looking in the mirror and realizing that it wasn't just affecting him, it was affecting his team and the tone that would be set going forward. And he made an adjustment, made a change. And hey, you talk to all the best coaches in the NHL, whether it's John Cooper or it's Pete DeBoer or Paul Maurice, and those may be the trifecta of the best 3 in the NHL. In my view, they are. They have all learned how to adapt, and they have been able to figure out how to change as the athletes change and as the league changes. And Ryan showed me that he's willing to do that and able to do it.
Maturation is for everybody, broadcasters included, I suppose.
Yeah.
What's the next Sharks captain going to have to be? And I don't think Mike Greer is going to watch this video and listen to any suggestions we have, so I don't really want to name names. But if there is even going to be a captain of next season or the year after that, what does that person have to be and do for the group considering where they're at right now?
Well, number one at the top of the list, in my opinion, is that player has to have earned it.
Yeah.
Not just be handed it because of his name or his perceived status by the fan base or whatever that is. So I think that player has to earn that. And how do you earn the captaincy? Well, there's various ways. A veteran player can earn it through years of service and maybe Stanley Cup playoff pedigree, if not a ring itself. And there's some rings on the Sharks roster that, in particular, Tyler Toffoli, a name that's come up. But then there's also examples in the NHL, and go no further than Colorado when Gabriel Landeskog was named the captain of the Avalanche, and at that time the youngest captain in the NHL. I think he was 20, maybe 2021, and that worked. And they went to the Stanley Cup and they won a championship. I think the obvious name is Macklin Celebrini, but he's 18 years old, and that's a lot to put on the player who is still, even though he had a great year, he is still figuring this league out. Believe me, he hasn't got it all figured out yet. And maybe whenever he retires, hopefully in 20-some years, he will admit, I still don't have it totally figured out. It's a tough league to master. But that's a lot to put on an 18-year-old's plate. And he'll be 19 by training camp. However, that's a judgment for Mike Grier and his staff to make as to whether or not that player's ready for it, and also to read the rest of the room. Are the veteran players like Toffoli or Vlasic, or go on down the line, are they ready to be led by Macklin Celebrini? And if the judgment is that they aren't, then you have to find someone else. And maybe the answer is a rotation of the captaincy, which other teams have done. And that's worked as well. But I think when you get to the point that you're a playoff team and you're vying for a Stanley Cup, you need a captain. You need everyone to know definitively who that leader is. And the Sharks aren't there yet. So I don't really think it's that big of an issue right now for the hockey team, but I do think they need a captain, obviously.
It's weird how that works in hockey. Some people and players will say, well, a captain doesn't matter, or it's a group effort. But then here we are to say that, if you really want to take yourself seriously, you do need that one leader, that one voice. So I agree with you. Last thing here, the draft, right? That's going to be exciting enough. The number 2 overall pick, 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks. But I think beyond the draft, July 1st, once free agency opens up for the Sharks, I mean, this is going to be, Randy, the first time in a long time where this team actually has to spend to get to the salary cap floor. So there have to be some new, interesting, veteran, probably leadership-type players coming in. So how do you see the excitement of the draft versus the excitement of free agency? I don't think enough people are talking about free agency yet.
Well, what the Sharks do at the draft, obviously, is an unknown. Number 2 overall. Will Schaefer, the defenseman, be there at number 2? Will the Islanders take him? Will they trade that pick to somebody else who covets that defenseman and is willing to pay a ransom to get that player? Or do they perceive someone else, the Islanders I'm talking about, to be of more value to them? And maybe they work some deal with the Sharks to make sure that they don't take Schaefer, because I think that the sense would be that if Schaefer is at number 1, the Sharks would want to improve defensively. But then you listen to Mike Grier and he said, look, we are not in the position yet to draft for position. And by that, I mean, the Sharks have so many needs in so many areas that, hey, you draft Michael Misa at number 2 and you've got another elite center. There's benefit there. But then what message are you sending to your other top centers then if you're drafting another top center? There's so many things that are built into that. But you make an excellent point about free agency. Beyond that, there's obviously a particular name that's above everyone else probably, and that's Mitch Marner if he doesn't re-sign with Toronto before July 1st. Are the Sharks ready to step up to the plate and swing for a player like that? And make that long-term financial commitment, presumably 7 years to get him? I don't know. And would they rather stick to draft, develop, and bolster their lineup through free agency by adding veteran players who can assist the process, if you will, over the next few years as the Sharks try and get back into the playoffs? I wish I had an answer for you on that as to what the plan is. But clearly, just with the attrition of the roster that through trade, the Sharks are going to add. There's no question about it. And it'll be fun and exciting to see what they add. And I think at some point you are going to see the Sharks, as we look at playoffs now and see what it takes to win in the playoffs. You refer back to the great Brian Burke, who said every good team needs a level of truculence. And you need some players that are not afraid to go into the trenches and mix it up. And because we're finding out that that's what it takes in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Not that that's a bulletin to anybody; it usually does. And when you got Ryan Clough as your assistant general manager, you can imagine who the kind of players he would be pushing for in that regard as well. So that makes it exciting too. We want a Sharks team that, yes, has elite offensive talent. We want a good defensive squad that has world-class goaltending in front of it. We want a team with some bite. It's part of what goes back to what Ryan Warsofsky said at the beginning of last year, is we want to get our respect back in the NHL. And I think the Sharks got a level of that this year, but they still finished 32nd.
Yeah.
So let's keep that in mind. And there's more respect to be attained, and maybe a little more bite in the lineup is part of what they'll be looking to add in this offseason. I hope so. It makes things more spicy.
Hey, buddy, the pipes are sounding great. The tan is looking great. You are in great off-season form. Rest up. We've got an interesting year ahead.
Thanks, Brodie.